morning. Welcome back to First Talk with Hal Rowe on 1290 WHKY Talk Radio for the Greater Hickory Metro. Talking this morning with supporters of and members of Citizens for Equity in Government. Billy Sudderth joins us this morning as a facilitator for some of the Citizens in Equity in Government meetings. Thank you very much for joining us. Also joining us this morning, Joe Brannock. He's a supporter of the petition right now that is calling for a referendum for the voters for the city of Hickory between the ward system and a general election system for the way that members of city council are elected. Do I have that right?
That's right. All
right, very good.
100%.
Mr. Brannock, let's go back to 1961. Now, you helped me on this during the break. Let me see if I get it right. 1959, a committee is formed to take a look at the ward election versus general election. At that time, it was done by ward election. You vote for the person in your ward, you elect them to the city council. The ward only voted for that. If I lived in Ward 1, I don't vote for the person in Ward 2 come general election. I vote for the person in my ward to serve my ward in city council. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so 1961, the committee of 5 makes its report to the city council. That committee, well, you go ahead and tell us now, because you'll get the numbers right and I might not.
Okay, well, I know everybody's getting up this morning, and we're going to have a brief history lesson, so I hope we don't put anybody back to sleep.
That's all right. If they're listeners to the First Talk program, they're fine. We've had our coffee. Okay.
Right. A committee was formed in 1961. They reported back to City Council. It was a committee of 5 members. They made recommendations to bring the city charter back in line with, not in line, but issues that were covered in state statutes didn't need to be redundantly covered in the city charter.
So if the state statute was in place, that took precedence, it was fine?
Well, yeah. Okay. I mean, there's no need to go over that in the city charter. So Several recommendations were made by this committee. One of the recommendations that was made was to change from a ward system to an at-large system. Now, of the committee of 5, that decision was made 3-2. 3 of the guys supported it, 2 didn't.
Within that committee.
Within the
committee, right. Okay.
Now, that committee in 1961 presented a list of their recommendations to City Council. City Council adopted some of the recommendations. It was, that instead of City Council appointing a police chief, the city manager would take over. So there was a lot of changes that were adopted.
Right.
One of the changes that was not adopted, and it was unanimously voted down, was this change in the election system. They unanimously decided to keep the ward system as it is. Now, in 1967, the 1967 city
unanimously voted.
Council voted.
Okay.
The council voted. We're going to keep the ward system that we have.
Gotcha. Okay.
In 1967, City Council revisited this issue and decided that we will consider changing from a ward system to an at-large system.
Okay.
And that's what they did. Yeah, do you want to get into the votes?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, well, yeah. So in 1967, the City Council, going back to the recommendations of 1961, the 1961 committee, voted. First, they voted they called a special meeting on a Monday morning, and they voted on this issue, and it was a 4-2 vote. So they voted to pass the recommendation to switch to an at-large system. Now, to enact something in the city has to be voted on, read, and voted on twice.
Right.
This was a Monday morning. On Tuesday, during the regular meeting.
The next day?
The next day.
Okay.
According to the Hickory Daily Record of the time, it was March the 6th. That morning, Monday morning, they voted. It was 4-2. It passed.
Right.
On March the 7th, going to the city council minutes of that meeting, on March the 7th, they voted again for the second reading.
Right.
And it passed 4-3.
Okay.
Now, to me, and I think a lot of people, I would like for them to know that this wasn't a unanimous decision.
Okay.
This was, it seemed to be a contentious decision at the time. It was unanimously rejected in 1961.
Right.
1967, it seems to be the thing to do, but even at that time, there were a lot of people, council members included, that thought this isn't the way to go. Okay. They went in and the Hickory Daily Record reported on some of the concerns that the council members that voted against it had at the time.
Right.
They worried about building block votes within wards to defeat members in other wards. And I'm not going to say we have that. I think an argument can be made that we perhaps do. But some of the council members that voted against it as well, Alderman Abey at the time in 1967, who supported the ward system, is quoted as saying in the city council minutes that he's talked with people throughout the city, and in no case has he found anyone who favors the at-large system. He went on to remark that if the matter were put to a vote of the people, he believed the people would vote against it. Now, to get to that, State Rep. Reed Poovey at the time, thought it would be a good idea to put this to a vote to the people. Put it on the ballot, let the people of Hickory decide.
Right.
And that was flat out rejected. And that's what the petition actually does. The petition doesn't say you are for the ward system or you are for an at-large system.
Right.
The petition simply states you're for giving the people of Hickory a chance to choose.
Okay. So that's basically what the petition is for.
Right.
It's to say we want the people of Hickory to say whether they want a ward or whether they want a general election.
Right.
So is that happening?
Slowly but surely, I think. I think we're about a third of the way to getting that total number of signatures that's required by the Board of Elections.
And how many is that? Do you have that number off the top of your head about how many it is?
Well, there's about 25,000.
About 25,000
registered voters.
About 26,000 registered voters in the city of Hickory. A little over 26,000. We need 10% of that.
So you need about 2,600 signatures.
Right.
So you're telling me you got basically over about 1,000 right now?
We're about a third.
About a third of the way. So 1,200 somewhere in there.
Right.
Okay. So that's one of the things that you wanted to talk about this morning was that. And one of the questions I asked during the break is that happening? And are people aware of this? And that's one of the things that you wanted to make sure that people are aware of. When they sign this petition, if they sign the petition, they're not signing a petition saying, we're going to go back immediately to the ward system. This is simply to get a vote. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So...
Well, I think it's to go back because, like I said, efforts were made to allow for citizen input 40 years ago.
Right.
Those efforts were quashed for whatever reason, and this is simply going back and, in my opinion, correcting a wrong that was made 40 years ago.
Okay, that's your point, is that this was not done properly as far as you're concerned. Maybe properly.
Properly, yeah.
Probably, we've got to use that word very carefully.
With quotation marks.
Right, but your concern is that there was not enough maybe citizen input at that time.
Probably. Well, and two, and we can get into this later if we have time, but I think there are vast differences. There are some very good advantages that the ward system offers that the at-large system, they're just not there.
Okay. Mr. Sudderth, is that pretty much you're in agreement with him on this?
Yes, especially concerning the historical analysis that he raised, because at that particular time, the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965, which gave minorities a right to begin to seek public offices throughout the South. And what had happened, we knew then that we were getting ready to run people for the city council seat. In fact, we ran a person, and at that particular time, but while we were running that person, it's been about 40 years ago now, that fall in 1970, they changed the way they did business. They changed from the ward system to the at-large system, but in the meantime, one of the members of the city council had passed, and then they appointed someone from the black community, a gentleman that came to town from nowhere almost, and they appointed this man, Dr. Watts, to the city council seat against the wishes of the leadership in the community. And they were saying, where is this coming from? I was here at that particular time. I know a good friend of mine was running for and we had other to take that seat.
We got to go to a break. We'll be right back.